Hey Sherpas, I'm sitting out here on one of those rare not so sunny days in California, contemplating what I think is probably, no exaggeration, the most important post I have ever posted. I want to share with you four reasons to have a church-wide assimilation strategy, basically how to sell having a church-wide assimilation strategy to your church and staff. You know, in an environment where 94% of the churches in our country are not keeping pace with even the growth in their communities, I think a church-wide assimilation strategy, if it's not the reason, it's definitely in the top three. You know, most church leaders are suspecting this, but they need help convincing either their board, their lead pastor, their exec team, or maybe even themselves that now is the time to invest in not an additional program for the church, but a church-wide unsiloed strategy to connect guests and turn them into connected serving members. So I want to give you four reasons to sell your church and yourself and the leaders in your congregation on having a church-wide assimilation strategy. Here's reason number one: increased attendance. Increased attendance. You know, we've been trained to think of outreach events as the way to grow our church. You know, I was meeting with about 17 different churches, leaders from these 17 churches, and I asked them, how many of you have outreach events? And the average was 3 to 4 outreach events a year for those 17 churches. Many of them were very successful, hit critical mass, had decisions for Christ. Then I asked, how many of your churches have grown this year? One. And it was in a notable but not astronomical way. How is it that we can keep having outreach events and large gatherings and even large weekend gatherings and still not see our attendance grow? What's wrong? What's broken? You know, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. I am telling you that you have guests coming to your church every weekend. How many do you think that is? Just guess. How many on an average weekend? Forget the holidays, the big weekends. How many guests do you have? Multiply that by 52. That's how many weekends a year. That's how many guests are coming to you that are not the same as the birds in the outreach bushes we plant that gather there. They are birds in the hand. Let me tell you what's different about the birds in the hand. Number one, they are going through something that made them want to look for God, and they Googled your church. The birds in the outreach event didn't do that. Number two, there are people who are pre-connected, who have people in your church that have been praying for them and have finally got them to come, and they're pre-connected. And number three, there are people who are looking for another church, who came from another church, and there is something about your congregation that made them want to pay a visit. Folks, if you can connect them, your church will grow, period. Because a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. And I'm telling you that if you take whatever number of guests you have times 52, you will keep half of them on average for 6 months, but a fourth of them, if you have a church-wide assimilation strategy, you will make into small group attenders and ministry team members. They'll be volunteers, they'll be serving, and they'll be around for years to come. A fourth of that number, that's the same odds as the parable of the soils that Jesus said we'd have. So I'm telling you, that is one reason: increase attendance, to have a church-wide assimilation strategy that your entire staff works. The second reason is increased momentum. You know, when we first started our assimilation ministry, I kind of crafted it almost from a blank canvas. We moved from a growing church to the 11th fastest growing church in the country. After 5 years of working that strategy, we just became the second fastest growing church in 2017 in the U.S. That is really something, because we're doing good by those God is bringing onto our campus, okay? And we're not keeping all of them, but we're keeping a fourth of them. We're connecting them. And we're seeing increased growth in our church and attendance every weekend, as well as increased momentum in the right direction. But a third reason is increased unity. You know, Gene Apple, our senior pastor, saw the power of the environments and the connection that was happening with new people, new to Christ, new to our church. And he wanted to come up with a way to get the entire church to be a part of that, even if they'd been coming for decades. And on a fishing trip, Gene came up with this: hey, let's do it, the same exact program for assimilation, but do it through our small groups for a season and invite them all to do it. At that point, I think that was around 2014, we had about 800 or 900 people choose to do it. They all got backpacks with a whole kit to do it. They jumped in, and as a result, we saw everybody in our church kind of get on the same page, not just about our assimilation strategy, but about who we were as a church, what our vision was. New people and old people got it together, and it was fun. But here's a fourth reason. It's not just increased attendance, momentum, and unity, but get this, it's increased income. Our director of operations at the time started showing me statistics that because of what we were doing with our new guests, which included some training in generosity and in saving and in budgeting, resulted in increased income for the church. I started watching families who had no church background and who had no real background with God, all of a sudden be giving 10%, giving up their gardener. I could think of one family that did in order to start at 10%. One gave up their cable TV and went to rabbit ears so that they could do this. And we saw it on the bottom line. But folks, you know why to have a church-wide assimilation strategy? Just do it because it's the right thing to do. Do it because people matter to the Father. Do it because what father would keep giving a weekly allowance to a child who lost it every week? If you need my help on any of this, hit the contact me link below and ask me whatever question you want, and let's begin the adventure of doing the best we can with those God is bringing our way.